How should a state be structured? How much equality does it need? And what is justice anyway? These are the questions addressed by the philosophical thought experiment Veil of Ignorance. Its inventor claims that inequality can be just, as long as everyone benefits from it. The thought experiment originates from the US philosopher John Rawls. His theory of justice of 1971 is considered the most influential work of 20th century political philosophy. In it, Rawls asks on what basic principles a just state should be built. Rawls assumes that in this primordial state, often mistakenly interpreted as the state of nature, all people are completely equal and therefore have no interests directed toward or against each other. Likewise, for the same reason, they will not be able to falsify their decision about the principles of justice and thus choose a just social contract. Also, in the initial state, where individuals have only very general information, we assume that with respect to primary public goods, for example, freedoms, infrastructure, and so on, they will strive to have more of them rather than less. Certain facts are supposed to be unknown. No one knows his place in society, his class or social status, or his endowment of goods, intelligence, strength, and so on. Even his individual psychology, such as the tendency to optimism or pessimism, risk-taking, or belonging to a certain generation. On the other hand, general facts about human society should be known. People understand political problems and economic theory, social organization, and regularities of human psyche. Rawls achieves this complete equality by treating the following factors of human beings and human life as irrelevant to justice: mental, physical, and social characteristics such as skin color, race, gender, religious affiliation, position within society, social status, material possessions, mental and physical abilities such as intelligence, level of society, for example, in terms of progress of civilization and culture, belonging to a certain generation, a veil against partiality. Rawls believed that a fair process was needed to determine justice. This is where the veil of ignorance comes in. Namely, it guarantees that the search for the basic rules of coexistence is not driven by self-interest. The veil ensures impartiality. Those who determine the basic principles of society should decide impartially and fairly. This is best achieved when one does not know how the decision will affect oneself. If you are rich, you are biased when it comes to the wealth tax. The same is true for the poor. However, if you don't know whether you will live in society as a rich person or a poor person, you will create laws that treat the rich and the poor fairly. Those who have the veil of ignorance tied around them will define basic rules of living together that are fair to all people. But what does that mean? What could poor, rich, men, women, believers, atheists, smart, lazy thinkers, creeps, and hippies agree on behind the veil of non-knowledge? Inequality for the weakest. As a first step, according to Rawls, they will design the ground rules so that everyone has the same rights and as many freedoms as possible. As many freedoms for everyone as possible is the overriding principle, because everyone wants to be able to live out their preferences. Basic rights such as the right to freedom of movement, to property, to freedom of speech and choice, or the prohibition of discrimination should apply equally to everyone. Within the framework of these basic rights and freedoms, inequalities should only be tolerated in a second step if they benefit everyone, including the weakest. Inequality is thus preferable to equality only if everyone benefits from it. This rule is also called the difference principle or the Maximin rule, because it maximizes the minimum by helping the worse off. Third, the positions of the better off must in principle be open. Imagine that behind the veil sits a gambler playing poker. He hopes to be rich and thinks that the rich should not be punished for their wealth, but rewarded. He consciously accepts the risk of poverty. Rawls does exclude such risk-taking gamblers in his thought experiment. But are gamblers unreasonable? A veil for racists. Further, It has been objected against Rawls that the veil by no means guarantees a neutral judgment. Behind the principles of justice that Rawls claims can be agreed upon, in fact hides an individualistic Western model of society. This becomes clear when we ask ourselves, what principles could religious fundamentalists agree on behind the veil of ignorance? What would a gang of racists agree on? Would a racist perhaps even agree to be treated worse as a person of color? The crucial question then is, can we abstract from our own worldviews and values in determining justice? Is there a neutral justice that is not dependent on any worldview or conception of the good life?